Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Farzad Misbahi and I worked at Tesla for 4 years. I worked as a program manager in the distribution and supply chain organizations, and I worked with different teams to implement processes, develop processes, leading teams, creating dashboards and analytics, amongst other things. Today's video is going to be about me covering what my prediction is for Tesla stock here in the next 15 or so years. This is something that I've been doing for fun for the last 8 years. I've actually created a Reddit thread since really 8 years ago where I tried to predict what Tesla was going to do from a sales perspective, what their revenues were going to look like, what their margins were going to look like, things like that. And I've kind of kept a log of that model through Reddit and through other posts I've made. And this is going to be my newest version of that. And yeah, I'm looking forward to sharing this with all of you wonderful people that are watching this video. And yeah, it should be really, really fun. But before we start that, I actually want to take the time for a few seconds here to really thank everybody who has supported me thus far. I've only been really creating YouTube videos for, I don't know, like 2 weeks now. And my first video got a ton of really, really positive feedback. And I just want to really extend a huge thank you to everyone who has watched my video, who has liked the video, shared it, and all the people that have subscribed to my channel because of that. I'm very thankful. Thank you so much. It really made me super, super happy to see all the positive responses. And it's got me really, really pumped up to create content for you guys. So if you find that you like this video as well, I would love it if you give me a like, subscribe, post any comments, any questions, feedback you have. I'm very big on making sure that I gather all the positive and negative feedback so that I can do better as I go through this journey here and creating YouTube videos for all of you to see. Yeah, so let's get started on this video. So the way to think about this model is I'm really trying to predict what the company is going to look like in 14 to 15 years, right? So that's a far ways out, but there are certain things that Tesla's working on today that allow us, I think, to sort of lay out a groundwork of what the company could look like in about 14, 15 years time. 4 primary ways to think about Tesla and the way I built out my model present day, right? So we can't really predict what the company is going to look like exactly in 15 years, but using the 4 really primary profit flows for the company or potential profit flows are transportation, energy, artificial intelligence, and outsourcing, right? So transportation is going to be anything that is cars, other objects that move people from place to place. It could one day have things like boats, have things like planes. For this model, those 2 I didn't include because I really don't even know how to think about that yet. So it's primarily going to be around, I guess you could call it land transportation. The energy side is going to be primarily around solar roofs, solar panels, power wall, power pack, and utility scale batteries as well. So that model is going to be there for that. The third one is going to be artificial intelligence. So these are things like full self-driving, the robotaxi network, either one that's run through Tesla or one that a user or a driver per se would be adding their car to the network and things like that. AI would also include things like the bot, right? And the bot is something that we've just learned about not too long ago, but could potentially have tremendous impact to the company. And then lastly, it's the outsource, which is Tesla's not really doing it. If they have done it, they've done it in such a small scale that it doesn't really impact the company's financials. But these are things like creating drivetrains for other companies, which I think as the years go on, Tesla will be one of the big players, if not probably the player, to provide drivetrains to other manufacturers when it comes to electric cars or just electric mobility. This could also be extended to things like the full self-driving computer software, the full self-driving software. But for this model that I've built right now, it's really just centered around the drivetrain itself. And I'll cover that in detail as we go through the model. We'll start with the transport part of the business. And so the way to think about transport is right now, if you think about the different market shares that Tesla has 60% plus market share in the United States. They have, I think, somewhere upwards of 20% market share in China and in Norway, which is one proxy to use, in my opinion, for what the potential long-term market share for Tesla could be. It's about 40%. So I think about 40% market share based on the Norway model on how many cars that Tesla sells in that market. And then I assume 2 different things. One is that by 2035, there's really 2 scenarios. Either the global car market is about 100 million cars sold per year, which is exactly where we are today, or it doubles, based on China production, India production, Africa production, as well as other countries ramping up their cars as well. And if you think 15 years from now, if full self-driving takes off and you have a lot more capabilities of people having their own private vehicles to go around, you would think that there would be more vehicles on the road, especially when these vehicles are super safe and very easy to drive around, and you don't really have to worry about maintaining any cars. But the only reason why I also take into account 100 million car per year model is because I think it's going to be, for the next few years, there's going to be quite a bit of disruption around existing OEMs trying to get their supply chain up and running for electric vehicles. We already kind of see this with GM, Ford, and others, Volkswagen, Mercedes, players like Toyota, who haven't really done much. Nissan, I think, just announced something around $17 billion investment, but who knows where that's going to go. And so, during that chasm, there's going to be probably a big shrink in the new car sales until the supply chain gets caught up. And so by 2035, I'm predicting it's either going to go back to where we are today, or if everyone executes at a very high level, which, we'll see if that's the case, it could be as big as 200 million. And so the way to think about this is, in about 15 years time, you're either going to have 40% market share on 100 million cars, or 20% market share on 200 million cars, right? So if everybody gets their stuff together and they're able to execute at a high level, you would think that Tesla is going to concede some of its market share to other players. Whereas if we're only at 100 million global cars sold in 15 years, you can assume that something has happened, and really the only company today that's positioned to take advantage of that is really Tesla. So it would make sense for us to assume that their market share will be significantly larger than 20%. And for this model, I assume 40%. And so this 40% market share at 100 million or 20% at 200 million, it's very hard to assume that Tesla would be making anything less than 25% operating margin based on those sales. And there's a couple of things that sort of walk me through that. Today, Tesla's already making over 10% operating margin on their current production today. This is without Austin factory being live. This is without Berlin factory being live. You do have China going, and then you also have Fremont, which is weighing margins down. And the reason why that is twofold. One, you have a lot of legacy components in that factory that have been there for God knows how many years. A lot of legacy processes that are incredibly hard to rejigger or shift when you've already sort of filled up that factory to the gills with machinery and equipment. You have a lot of the Model 3 legacy processes that, from everything we've seen, especially the things that Elon has shared through the hardships, exists, right? So things like processes that shouldn't have been in the first place when it comes to automation, mistakes around what sort of materials to use. You also have to keep in mind they're not using any of the gigacasting methods that they want to do, like the front and rear casting, or the floor for the battery. It doesn't include the 4680 cells, which is again another huge cost benefit. So on and on and on. And then from my internal experience being there, there's still a lot of low-hanging fruit everywhere, to be completely honest. And so it becomes very easy for me to see how Tesla can get to 25% operating margin as it pertains to transportation itself, right? If anything, that's probably conservative, to be completely honest, but I don't know what it's going to look like in 15 years, right? You kind of don't know what the pricing pressures are going to be from competition, so on and so forth. But I would find it very hard to believe that Tesla would be at anything less than 25% operating margin in 15 years when it comes to transport. Again, it could be low, but we'll see. And then you also take into account the different comments that Elon has made around manufacturing becoming Tesla's core strength, which firsthand I can tell that's true. And the reason why is the amount of talent in that building in Fremont and everywhere else in the company really is out of this world good. And so those guys and gals are going to be able to figure out how to squeeze every penny out of those processes. And it will take a lot of time, but they'll get there. And I think Model Y in Austin and Berlin will be the first indications, even in China really. Those will be the biggest indications for us to see what the real potential looks like from a margin perspective for Tesla. So keep an eye out for that, and I'll be using that for my own model to figure out what does the margin trajectory for Tesla look like in the future. And then I'm assuming about $46,000 average selling price for these vehicles by 2035. And I'll share a table on either side of my finger that will show you exactly what the breakdown of each vehicle type is going to be that will get us to that point. And so really what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to extrapolate out what the car sales will look like long term for each segment, as well as new segments that will come down the pike as well. And the way I'm extrapolating that is I'm taking the current breakdown of market share percentage by segment based on today's data. Again, this could very easily change over time, but the extrapolations are essentially mirror the global segment breakdown for each one of those cars. So then the Model S and Model X would be essentially equivalent to the market share breakdown that exists today globally. Same thing with the Model 3, the Model Y, and so on and so forth. And that's what how those numbers are derived. And so based on those numbers, the transportation total revenue by 2035, and this number is going to sound really big, but it's just math. It's about $1.85 trillion per year by 2035. And with a net income of $460 billion, which will give us a 25% net income margin for transportation. And so pocket that $460 billion number, and we'll talk about that more in detail later on, but that's how I think about transport. 40 million cars by 2035 at a 25% net income percentage at about $46,000 average selling price. Now for energy, this one for me personally was the hardest one to model, because honestly, I don't even know how to think about this, but I try to give it a shot. So the way I try to think about this one is currently there are about 1.16 billion homes in the world, okay? So this includes anything from a luxury, villa in California somewhere to some hut in some third world country, unfortunately. And so the way I think about that 1.16 billion number is I try to apply a Pareto rule to figure out what percentage of those houses could potentially benefit from some sort of solar solution. And so I take that 1.16 billion global number for houses, and then I assume 20% will be eligible, times another 20% of those that are willing to take advantage of it. And that gives us about 46 million homes. And so in those 46 million homes, I assume that all those homes will eventually buy some sort of Tesla solar solution, but it will take about 30 years to complete the buyout for those houses essentially. So it'll be about a 30-year time frame between all those homes slap a solar roof or solar panel on their roof. And so if you take that 46 million home number and you divide that by 30, you end up with about 1.5 million homes per year that would want to put some sort of solar on their homes from Tesla. And if you take that number and divide it by 2, assume that half of them will go solar roof, half of them will go solar panels, then each one of those segments will get about 770,000 units installed per year. So 770,000 for solar roof, 770,000 for solar panels. And then if you take that number and try to extrapolate out what that run rate would look like on a weekly basis, it's roughly about 15,000 roofing units per each division per week. Which if you take cars today, we are honing in up to about 1 million cars per year, which is roughly 20,000 cars per week. And so it's probably not unrealistic to assume that each one of those units will be able to generate 15,000 units per week within 15 years. If anything, if Tesla is really confident about its manufacturing capability, you would assume something like that would happen. And that's how I arrived to the net number of units sold for solar roof and solar panels by 2035. And then as far as the pricing methodology goes, I assume about $28,000 per solar roof by 2035 and roughly $14,000 per solar panel installation. So $28,000 is, I don't know, what is it, like 2 times up to 3 times more than a regular house today if you were to get your roof replaced. So you assume, that price probably falls in line really nicely, given that that roof's going to generate power for you, take into account inflation, so on and so forth. And then assume half of that will be the case for solar panels. And then for each one of those roofs and panels, we assume that the customer will buy about 2.5 power walls per roof. And I use that number to extrapolate out what my Powerwall number will look like for each one of those homes. And if you take that 1.5 million roofs sold each year and you apply that 2.5 times multiplier on that, you end up with about 3.8 million Powerwalls sold per year. And then for those Powerwalls, I'm assuming the same level of pricing as now, which is about $7,500 per Powerwall sold. And then for the utility sales for energy, I'm trying to extrapolate out what the global need is for energy today, and that's the link that I'll share in the description below. I used a chart for US megawatt hours sold essentially to the entire country in 2020, and then I assume that 17%, that the US is 17% of those sales, okay? And so globally, that would be, that number divided by 0.17, so it gets us to a whole global megawatts sold to the entire world. And then taking that megawatt number, I essentially say, okay, so take that megawatt number and then assume that Tesla captures 10% of that global number. And then if we assume 10% of the global power utilization for the entire world is driven through Tesla utility or Tesla power pack or whatever you want to call it, then I assume 13 cents per kilowatt hour essentially, which is the same as the US right now. Probably will be less because of how efficient it will be to utilize those different systems, given that they're fully renewable. Then the global number for Tesla utility units sold is roughly $260 billion per year by 2035. And so that's how I try to scale up what the utility sales will be. Now you could make an argument that again, 10% is conservative, but the energy part of the business is super hard for me to sort of extrapolate. And then you'll notice as I go through the model at the end is that the energy part of the business is going to be significantly smaller than the transport business. And I know long-term, Elon said that it will be, it will match or potentially surpass the transport business. But until we get to that point, it's going to be very hard for me to understand how that will be. So it very well could be. And if that's the case, then the stock price is going to, God knows what it's going to do. But that's how I'm thinking about it. And then from a net income percentage perspective, I take the same exact number that I use for transport, which is 25%. And so the assumption there is that it's some sort of manufacturing process where they're creating solar panels and solar roofs and batteries and so on and so forth. And so, without me knowing anything specific about the processes, it's probably not unrealistic to assume that they'll be able to achieve a very similar net income percentage as they did with the transportation on the energy side. And then if we think about the total revenues then by 2035 for both, for all energy subsegments, we end up with $321 billion per year by 2035 with a net income number of $80 billion per year, which nets out to our 25% net income percentage. And that is the energy side of the business. Now, the real fun one is AI. And so AI is one that is AI is the one that has by far the most potential, okay, from a profit perspective. And this one was really, really fun to think about. Honestly, was blowing out my model in ways that I didn't expect it to. And so on purpose, I try to be very conservative about what that potential could be. And so the way I think about the AI side of the business for Tesla is you got the robotaxi revenue, you got the full self-driving software suite revenue, and then you got the bot revenue. And so if we think about the full self-driving recurring revenue to start, assume that by 2035, 20% of the entire Tesla fleet is going to be adding their car to the Tesla network. So they're willing to sort of take their car and saying, yep, everybody, you can use my car to get yourself driven around. And assume that 20% of the fleet, about $3,000 per year go to Tesla. And so the way I thought about that $3,000 number is it's some sort of cut out of a typical, Uber driver. So if an Uber driver, makes $60,000 per year driving Uber, Tesla takes 5%. Now, I have no idea if that's too low or too high. Again, the AI part of the model was blowing out the pricing completely. So I try to be very conservative about its potential. So that's how I ended up with that $3,000 number. Probably will be much, 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 much higher, but that's the number I'm going to go with. And then that same 20% number, you can assume that every new car that's sold by 2035 and on will be added to the fleet in some way with that same level of pricing that will go to Tesla, that $3,000 per car per year. Then I also assume that of the fleet that Tesla makes, so 40,000 cars per year in 2035, 5% of those will be specifically Tesla operated, and Tesla will be the ones that essentially make 100% of the profit. And there again, I assumed a level that's much cheaper than a typical Uber driver would be getting paid today. I assumed $15,000 per car made per year to Tesla. Then another layer I add is a full self-driving piece, which is the software itself that is sold as an add-on to the car. So I assume 80% of the cars that are sold any given year by 2035 are purchased with the full self-driving option. And then I assume that the full self-driving suite by 2035 will cost $15,000 per car. And then for all the different variables I just went through, so the fleet, the robotaxi network usage per individual driver, the Tesla robotaxi fleet, that 5% of the cars being Tesla operated, and the full self-driving software sold to the customer themselves, all those pieces will be sold at about 60% net income margin. Again, probably lowballing it there, thinking about full self-driving, it really is just software at that point. All the different systems, Dojo, all the other things, all those costs associated to that will be so minimal that I would be surprised if they eat away any margin whatsoever. But again, to try and be conservative, I assume 60% margin, which is super achievable by any software company out there today. And then lastly, for AI, we have the bot piece. So the bot is the one that I had the most fun modeling, but I have no idea what's going to happen here, but it's a fun exercise. So the way I thought about the bot is, okay, so take the current population on the earth right now, which is about 7.8 billion people or whatever that number is now. I think it might be even 8 billion by now. And then assume a subset of those people are actually able to take advantage of the Tesla bot in some way. Either the population is willing to take it on, or the countries are willing to take it on, so on and so forth. And then the way I thought about that is, okay, I kind of rank ordered, listed the different countries that might be interested in purchasing the bot. So countries like the United States, Germany, China, Canada, Sweden, Indonesia, Mexico. I just picked a bunch of different countries that my gut told me would be interested in taking advantage of such a thing. Might as well throw a dart on a board and just pick a bunch of different countries. But those countries ended up being about 2.5 billion people of the total population, right? And so that breakdown is roughly 32% of the total world population would be interested in purchasing the bot in some way. And then very similar to the use case I used for the energy part of the business, I assume that of those 2.5 billion people, 20% of them are actually truly interested in purchasing a bot. And then 20% of the 20% actually make the purchase of the bot, right? They actually go in and say, you know what, I'm going to buy a bot. Okay, for whatever. So factory worker, delivery driver, personal assistant, you name it, whatever that is. 20% of the 20% of the 2.5 billion are actually going to buy a bot by 2025. And I assumed $25,000 per bot. And so the reason why I assume $25,000 per bot is a few different variables. If you think about what a bot actually would be in this case, it's some sort of object that uses actuators and some sort of, skin or skeleton type thing that doesn't seem very, very complex if you really think about it from a parts perspective. There aren't a lot of moving parts. You got the joints, which is you think about your ankles, your knees, your hips, your elbows, your shoulders. Maybe the way maybe it has some sort of hinging around the spine or whatever. Your neck. Not a lot of moving parts, right? You got a computer somewhere in your body, and then you got the screen, and and then the limbs themselves are going to be some sort of solid piece of material, whatever that is. So from a complexity standpoint, from a number of parts standpoint, rather, it doesn't look that difficult. Obviously, getting it to balance and making sure it doesn't kill you, it's going to be a little bit more difficult. But from the manufacturing perspective, it doesn't seem that hard, okay? I say that without being a manufacturing expert, but you think about a car and how many pieces that has to work, and then you think about a bot, it seems to be quite a bit less parts. And so the way I think about 100 million bots per year is it's somewhere between number of cars that a company sells, like Tesla, by 2035, which is about 40 million per year, and the number of phones that are sold today per year, which is well over 1 billion units sold, right? And so that 100 million units sold per year is somewhere around that range, much closer to the car number. And that's to account for the complexity of building a bot and the size and all that stuff versus a phone. You could also think about it this way. It's, think about the volume that a car takes up, right? So a car is, I don't know, you can probably fit 10 bots in a car if you kind of try to use up all the volume within the car, like your typical car, some more, some less, lay them flat or whatever. So from a total materials perspective, it doesn't seem like it's a lot. It doesn't seem like each bot's going to take up too many materials. And so if you think about it that way, from a material perspective, the 100 million makes a lot more sense. Now, completely, I'll say here that it's a total shot in the dark here. 100 million bots by 2035 seems outlandish, but today. But for me, if I really think about it, 100 billion smartphones back in 2007 when the iPhone came out seemed insane, right? Or even 1 million Teslas sold by 2020 or 2021, 10 years ago seemed insane, So yeah, I don't know. For me, the AI part of the business seems like the App Store moment for Tesla as it was for Apple. And I think that's where the real long-term potential lies for a company like Tesla. And so for the bot itself, again, I assume that 60% margin on that unit, because the hardware components are not going to be that hard and materials are not going to be that hard to cost for. Again, when I say not that hard, it's sort of in relation to everything else that Tesla makes. And it's going to take advantage of that software, some sort of recurring revenue or something that's going to be baked into that $25,000 number. Could be higher, could be lower, I don't know. But essentially, that's how I think about the margins for the bot. And so if you take all those numbers together for the AI part of the business, if we take the revenue sold from the fleet recurring revenue, the full self-driving, Tesla fleet itself, and the bot sales, the revenue number for Tesla AI subdivision comes out to about $3.1 trillion per year by 2035. And then if we layer in the 60% margin on top of that, we come out to roughly $1.92 trillion in profit, net income per year by 2035. So big numbers. But, I try to come at it as reasonable as possible without discounting Tesla's ability to execute and Tesla's ability to manufacture, which, I've seen sort of firsthand, and just how much room there is there right now to do it even better. And so, yeah, those are my numbers. And so I'm curious to see where they end up. And so obviously that's going to have a huge impact in the model here, but those are the numbers I came up with. And then for the last division here, which is the outsourced piece of it, this one I'm really just starting to think about, and I have no idea what the long-term potential is going to be for this one. But the way I thought about it is, there's about 12 million sales per year that are going to go out to different car makers around the world, or hobbyists or whatever, that are looking to make a EV car with an EV drivetrain powered by Tesla. And that 12 million number, I assumed about $6,300 per drive unit. So that includes, or drivetrain rather, which includes the battery and the motors themselves. And then I assume that Tesla makes 25% net income percentage on that as well. So same margins as the transport and the energy side of the business. And then so if we take those numbers, which are going to be very small compared to the different variables that we have here, but it's one that we probably should include just based on Tesla's likely dominance around supply chain here in the coming years, is roughly $75 billion per year in revenue. And then that 25% net income margin will net us to roughly $19 billion in net income for the outsourced subdivision. And now we're at the point where we're able to take all these numbers, add them together, put a PE on it, a price earnings ratio on it, and then figure out what the Tesla stock price will look like by 2035. So let's go ahead and do that. And so if we think about the different net income numbers that we just went through for the 4 subdivisions, transport, we had it as $461 billion per year. Energy, we had it at $80 billion per year. Outsourced, we had it at roughly $19 billion per year. And then the big one, the big daddy, AI, which is at $2 trillion per year by 2035. Very easy to see by the numbers listed here that AI is by far the biggest potential for Tesla in the coming 15 years based on my assumptions. That brings us to a total net income dollars for Tesla in 2035 to $2.5 trillion. And then to figure out what the Tesla price will be based on that number, I assume a 24 price earnings ratio in 2035. And the way I think about the 24 is, by within 15 years time, Tesla is still going to be growing at a certain clip of about, call it 16% to 20% per year. Because, Tesla can't dominate forever. Who knows, they might, but let's assume they can't. And 24 seems to be a very, looking at the different stocks that are out there right now, for a fast growing company that has a lot of software revenue coming in at a very high margin with significant net income coming into the bottom line, and is also in manufacturing. 24, if anything, seems low, but that's the number I picked. And so if we take that 24 PE and then we apply that to each one of those net incomes that we talked about for each one of those subdivisions, for the transport, outsource, AI, and energy, then we're able to figure out what the price is going to be per one of those divisions. So you can think about what's the Tesla price contribution from transportation, what's the Tesla price contribution from energy, from AI, and so on and so forth. Then for transport, if we take the $460 billion per year by 2035 and we apply 24 price to earnings ratio, the Tesla stock price for just the transport subdivision would be about $8,900. So $8,900 we can say is likely to be Tesla's stock price by 2035 just from their transport. So if they were just selling cars and the market decided to give it a price earnings of 24, Tesla would be worth $8,900 per share, which is roughly a $8.9 trillion company. Assuming some sort of dilution in the next few years, I assume 2% here per year for the coming years. We come out with that number. For energy, if we take that $80 billion per year net income and we apply 24 price earnings ratio, we come out with a Tesla stock price of $1,549. For outsource, if we take the roughly $19 billion per year in net income and we apply 24 price earnings ratio on that, we come out with a Tesla stock price of $365. And then lastly, the big kahuna, the massive potential here, if we take the AI subdivision and we take the $1.975 trillion in net income and we apply a 24 price earnings ratio, we come out with a price of $38,078 per share. And then if we add all those price targets together for each one of those subdivisions, I'm predicting that Tesla stock price in about 15 years will be somewhere around $48,893, which from today's date is roughly 47x where we are today. Which is a lot. And so what I'll do now is I'll list a chart that shows what my predictions are per subdivision price target from now through 2035. And the way I came up with those numbers is I assume some sort of growth rate up to that point for 2035, and I work my way backwards. I try to layer in where I think the different things will kick in, like Cybertruck and the bot revenue and things like that. I'll also have the link to the model below in the description in full detail, so you can all poke around and see exactly where each one of those numbers come across. But I really wanted to take the time in this video is to outline my methodology, how I thought about the different price targets, how I thought about the margin that Tesla's going to make, the cars that they're looking to make, how they're going to tackle energy and things like that. And again, a lot of those things, I don't really have, to be completely honest, I don't have any insider information that tells me what these numbers are going to be. I really don't. I don't think anyone does. I don't think even Tesla knows what they're going to do next year, to be completely honest. They have goals. They know what they want to do. But based on what I've seen, from the standpoint of how much work there is still to be done, how many low-hanging fruits there are still in all parts of the business, Tesla's potential from a manufacturing perspective, the amount of talent, the amount of ridiculous talent they have in that company, and the total and uncompromising drive and focus of the entire Tesla team led by Elon himself, to me, makes this a very realistic thing. And so I'm not saying that you should listen to me and make decisions on my price targets. You do your own research. I don't know what the world's going to look like in 15 years. This is just something that's super fun for me to do and something that I was looking forward to sharing with you all, especially after all those amazing comments and likes and things that you guys left on my last videos. And so if you have any questions, comments, concerns, feedback, anything you want to talk to me about, drop a comment below. I would love to hear from all of you. Again, if you really like my content, I would super appreciate it if you like the video. Hit subscribe if you'd like to see more content from me. For now, I'll try to make a post at least once a week, depending on the things that are going on in my life and sort of the topics that I want to discuss. If there's anything you'd like me to cover specifically, let me know in the comments. I would love to hear from you and sort of what are the things you're looking from me from a content perspective. And I'm very much looking forward to continue to make content for you all. Yeah, thank you guys so much. I really appreciate you so much for watching my videos. Keep sharing, keep liking, keep subscribing, and we'll see you on the next one. Thank you.